Yeah, this recipe is very simple compared to most of my recipes. We're going to begin with a cup of milk, and this is going to go in the microwave for 30 seconds. Depends on your microwave. You want it warm. You want it slightly warmer than body temperature. Do not want it boiling. And as soon as it's at temperature, we're going to add the yeast and the sugar to it. First, get it hot. This is the mixer bowl for the stand mixer. I'm going to add a teaspoon of sugar to this, and I'm going to add the milk. And the milk is actually, it was microwaved for about 45 seconds. It's a little bit hotter than I actually want it to be, which is, it's easier to cool it off than it is to get it hot again. And now I'm going to add about 1/4 of a cup of distilled water to this. Or you can use any other good quality water. Just don't use tap water if your tap water is not very good, because chlorine will kill yeast. Now it's the temperature, just check it. It's just slightly above body temperature, which is what you want. And now I'm going to add an entire package of yeast to this. These come in fairly standard packs. Even in Russia, the package size is about the same. So we're going to add 1 pack of this. Give it a swirl. I'm going to cover this with a damp towel and let it stand for about 15 minutes. That's a longer rising time than you usually give it, but this will help it in the long run. About 15 minutes. Having been 15 minutes now, we're going to look at it, and as you can see, there's a lot of foam on top. At this point, we're going to crack an egg into this and transfer it to the stand mixer. As you can see, I have the stand mixer equipped with the dough hook. I'm going to mix this around a little bit, and then I'm going to begin adding flour to it. And the exact amount of flour that you add cannot be determined. It's going to be maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 cups in all, but it's very difficult to tell. You have to just see how it goes as you're working. And this is really the only tricky part to this whole recipe, is getting the dough to the right consistency. I'm going to add some salt at this point too, while it's still very liquid. And don't be afraid to add the flour. It'll only suck up what it needs, basically. As this stirs, it begins to, you can see there's flour stuck around the sides. So sometimes you have to turn off the mixer for a minute, scrape down the sides, start it up again. And you can hear it begins to feel the pressure. The stand mixer will begin to feel the amount of force that it takes in order to stir this around. That's a good thing. Now stop adding flour and just let it keep kneading for a while. You can see what this looks like. This is the trickiest part to this whole operation. You have to get the right amount of flour in it. Don't overdo it. Let it knead. If you put too much in, it's not kneading efficiently. If you don't put enough in, it's not kneading at all. It's just stirring around a pool of liquid. This is exactly the right consistency you want it to be at while it's doing the majority of the kneading. Take a look at this and try to remember it. I'm going to let it knead like this for about 10 solid minutes. Now, during this time, you may need to add a little sprinkle of flour here and there, especially if you see the dough starting to creep up the sides of the dough hook. You don't want it to be stuck on the dough hook, and adding a little bit of flour, just a tablespoon or so, will cause it to loosen and begin kneading again. Add a little more flour. Thing to pay attention to is to make sure the dough isn't just spinning around in the bowl, and to make sure that it's not, you don't have a giant pile of flour in the bottom of the bowl that's not being incorporated. You want to have most of the flour in the dough. Few crumbs in the bottom's okay, but you want it to be kneading the flour into the dough at all times. And ideally, at the end of 10 minutes, this is what you want to end up with. There's a solid, massive dough that's kind of being slammed from side to side in the bowl by the dough hook. it's very solid at this point, and now it needs a little bit of hand kneading. Okay, almost all the work has been done for us by the machine. Really, we just want to tighten this up, squeeze all the air pockets out of it, make sure that it's a nice coherent mass, and then we're going to leave it to rise the first rise. It's going to have a total of 2 rises here. This is a good looking piece of dough. We don't have to make a work of art out of it. I'm going to use the same bowl that we used for mixing it, it's fine. And this is a damp towel. I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to leave it to rise for at least an hour. You want it to make sure that the dough rises at least double in volume. It's been about 30 minutes so far, and the dough has risen up once. I'm going to punch it down, and we're going to let it rise one more time before we divide it out and start getting the naans ready. The dough has risen back up again, and now we're going to take this and form little balls about, I don't know. Depends on how big a naan you want, of course, but about like this. Just so it fits in your hand. I don't know, bigger than a golf ball, but not too much bigger. And we're going to set these on a plate or platter with a slightly damp towel over them and let them rise some more. It's been a little bit longer. As you can see, these have expanded in size considerably from the near golf ball size they were originally. Now we're going to take these and put them on a floured board, work surface anyway, and flatten them out. You can use a rolling pin. If you want to be really traditional, you'll just use your hands, but the rolling pin does a neater job of it. So the first step is to make our filling. We're going to put in these 4 cheeses in relative proportions that you see listed there in print. This is the Parmesan. This is the least of the cheeses. And then we're going to grate some onion. This is not something you can slice. You actually have to grate this. You want it to be like a liquid almost. You're going to get a paste like this out of it. And in all, you want about 2 tablespoons of this liquid onion paste. I used some red onion to make up the rest. It's just because it's what I had on hand as scraps of onion. You don't have to use that. You can use all white onion, or you can use all red onion. It won't make any difference. Then what you want to do is you want to take this and mix it together with your hand. And you have to keep working this. Work it together until you've got kind of a solid ball of cheese. And it's going to take you, you're going to have to mix this for about 2 solid minutes before you arrive at that stage. But after a couple minutes, you get something that's cohesive like this. That's the ball. Now you want to know how much dough to use for this. Well, it's easy. You tear off a piece that's roughly the same size as the ball of cheese. Just kind of eyeball it. If it's about the same, that'll be enough dough. So we have our dough. We're flattening it out to a disc on a floured board, or work surface anyway. And we're going to use a rolling pin and get this to, once we've got this set up, this is the 150 grams of cheese that went into it. And now we need to begin folding this into what's called a top knot. So you're going to take this, begin pinching it around. You don't have to be super careful with this. It's not like making some breads where it's important to be very, very neat, because this is going to end up getting flattened down, and what we're working on right now is the bottom side. So it really isn't going to show anyway. But you do need to have a good solid seal on this so that when it's cooking, the cheese won't run out. That will not be good. So once we've got all this gathered together here at the top, pinched into solid unit, now we're going to start flattening it down. And get a little bit flat, a little bit more flour, and you start flattening it from the other side. And you may discover that there's little pockets of air in here. that may not be a good thing. So you might have to do is take some kind of dowel, little knife or something, and poke a hole in it and press all that air out. This will seal itself again anyway as it's cooking. So the idea here is that you want to make this round and even. So you absolutely want to have the back of this sealed well. And once you got it to that point, like that, now you can start heating the pan with butter. And we have a pan over a medium heat. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 6. So it's close to medium, a little bit hotter than medium. And we're melting approximately an ounce of butter into this before we proceed. The butter is melted, as you can see. Little bubbles coming up out of it. And now we're going to put this disc of pastry down the good side. The top side goes face down in the pan first. And we're going to cook this slowly. This is part of the secret to this. If you try to rush it, it won't be good. You're going to cook it slowly, but as soon as we get a skin formed on that first side, on the top side, then we're going to turn it over and start cooking the other side. So give it about 2 minutes before you turn it. It's actually been about 3 minutes now. And now there's a skin on the other side. We're ready to flip it for the first time. And I'm actually going to turn the heat down now from 6 to 5. We're going to slow it down even more. And you'll begin to notice after a couple more minutes that this begins to puff up and rise. And now we have to concern ourselves with cooking the edges. And how we're going to do that is we're going to, as this cooks, we're going to push it against the sides of the pan here. Leave it on each side of the pan for a few seconds, 15-20 seconds, and keep working around it. It's important to seal the edges and get them cooked too, of course. Once it's had 2 or 3 more minutes on this side, we can go back to the first side again. And again, we're gonna keep rotating this around, pushing it against the edges of the pan to keep those sides cooking. And this is going to be a long process. Well, not that long. The whole thing should take about 12 minutes to cook. And you can see in from the side now how fat this is getting as this is continuing to cook and swell. And here's another couple minutes. It's getting very thick, as you can see. That's what we want. Just keep turning it back and forth, pushing it against the sides. Let it cook through. Then it'll be nice and flaky, and it'll be wonderful layers through it. If you try to cook it fast, it'll just be browned on the outside, it'll be raw dough in the middle. Eventually, it starts getting lopsided. It's so big that it won't even stay upright anymore. Okay, I got this off the pan just in the nick of time. In fact, a little bit of cheese did start to come out of the bottom, but that's all right. If it's, as long as it's just a little bit. You don't really want that, but sometimes you just cook it at 30 seconds too long, you're going to lose a little bit of cheese out of the bottom, but it was just a tablespoon. So this is quite thick now. You're going to leave this to rest for maybe 10 minutes and let it'll start to sink down as it it's been 10 minutes exactly by the clock. This is the time, moment of truth. You cut it open and you look inside it, you've got these wonderful layers. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.